Hurricane Florence's monetary toll could reach up to $50 billion by some estimates. I talked to PETA's field operations person who went to the storm front to help save companion animals. Their loss? Priceless. That's next on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this behind-the-scenes look at PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. Here we talk to the key players at PETA and the movement and ask them about how animal rights change their lives and how they stay motivated to make the world a better place for the animals. On today's episode, PETA deployed, saving animals, fighting Florence.
One of the dogs that we found, he was a large black Rottweiler mix. We found him in a backyard in a fenced-in area where, he was really just able to toe touch to keep out of the water. And it's just, at that point, the flood water had been up for 3 days. So how he stayed alive in that time of swimming and keeping above water for 3 days, it's just unbelievable.
Jes Cochran, the field operations manager for PETA's Community Animal Project, has returned from the Lumberton, North Carolina area where PETA's team of 5 people and a boat saved dozens of animals who were left behind by their owners. The moment the team landed, there were plenty of animals to save.
I wish there was a sign on every door saying, hey, there's a cat in here. Unless there's some indication that makes us know that there's, cat in a house or a dog in a house, we really don't know. If I thought there was more that we could do, we would stay down there. To the best of my knowledge, we didn't miss anybody. I know that's probably not true, and it's something that weighs on my mind. Success-wise, those animals that we did get out were given a second chance. That makes the trip successful, those animals that we got.
More on PETA's deployment efforts before and after Florence, next on the PETA Podcast. But first, thanks again for joining us here at the PETA Podcast. Please share a link with friends. Let them know the animals have a voice on the PETA Podcast. And if you're new to the podcast, binge away. There's the episode with PETA President and co-founder Ingrid Newkirk, episode 1. She talks about animal rights and about an issue you probably need to understand a little better. No-kill shelters, good or bad? Hear what Ingrid has to say about them in episode 1. And you can also hear Ingrid's words on why mothers on the southern border should have never been separated from their children. That's on episode 24. A cow is a child is an immigrant. Issue's been forgotten, but a record number of children remain separated. Hear how PETA is helping. All the SCOTUS talk have you wondering about the law and animal rights? Well, PETA's chief counsel, Jeff Kerr, is featured in episode 2. And find out more about a recent protest by a muscular dystrophy patient from the UK. He flew 10 hours from England to Texas A&M to protest that university's useless animal experiments. His interview in episode 32. And then check out episode 9 to find out more about how Texas A&M tortures dogs, giving them muscular dystrophy, knowing full well it has little relevance toward finding a cure that works for humans. Remember, if you're on Apple Podcasts, don't forget to rate and review the show. It helps the algorithm know that PETA has a podcast on the issues important to you. Now, if you really want to help the animals, you can always hit the Donate Now button at PETA.org. And if you're high-tech and have Amazon's Alexa, it's as easy as saying, Alexa, donate to PETA. And now to our episode. Hurricane Florence's flooding has reportedly killed more than 5,500 pigs and 3.4 million chickens and turkeys in North Carolina. Animals trapped by the factory farms that sustained the losses. It's so bad that PETA President Ingrid Newkirk is critical of the lack of preparedness, saying that the animals should have been evacuated prior to the storm. So, as Newkirk put it, to give the animals a fighting chance to survive. Said Newkirk, Be merciful and open the barn doors. Instead, the animals were trapped and doomed to their deaths. Companion animals didn't fare much better than the farm animals. According to Jes Cochran, who has been part of PETA deployments to Texas for Harvey, Puerto Rico for Maria, and now the Carolinas for Florence. She was surprised that many companion animals owners violated the first rule of hurricane survival, which is don't abandon them, don't leave them alone. Cochran has returned from the flood scene and talks about saving animals from Florence's wrath. Here on the PETA Podcast.
I think that everybody on the team is still pretty tired. We got in late Sunday night, so not quite recovered, still feeling pretty tired, but getting back to normal.
The very first time you were there, when was the first day?
We went down right before the storm because they weren't quite sure where the storm was going to hit, and we're in the Hampton Roads area, Norfolk, Virginia. So at the time, when we left, we thought that the storm was going to hit Hampton Roads. So we have a pretty bad flooding problem here. So even a little bit of water can kind of trap you in this area. So we did leave and stage outside of the storm area in North Carolina until it did hit. So we left. It was Wednesday the 11th.
Wow. So that's a long time. Did you think it was going to take that long, or were you prepared for the length of the whole ordeal?
Typically, when we respond to these situations, it's usually a couple weeks. We spent about 10 days in Texas after Harvey. We spent a couple weeks in Puerto Rico after Maria. So we expected it to be that long or close to that long. Mm-hmm. And we also knew that Florence was a really slow-moving storm. So we knew that it was going to take a little bit longer.
So you were in Harvey in Texas and Maria in Puerto Rico. How did Florence compare, just from the perspective of someone like yourself who was out there trying to rescue animals?
Florence felt a lot like Harvey, where there were a lot of areas really affected by the storm, not just a couple of cities. I mean, the whole coastline of North and South Carolina were just devastated by this storm. And, it felt very similar to Harvey in that there were, even though we knew it was coming, there were a lot of people that were caught off guard by the flash floods and needed to be rescued. And also, unfortunately, a lot of people were rescued from their homes and left a lot of animals behind.
Did you do more work for Florence? Was there more animals to be saved? What did you find?
I think that any time that we respond to a flooding situation, unfortunately, there have been animals left behind. That's why we really try to get the message out before the storm hits. If you're going to evacuate, or you have to evacuate after the flooding has started, you have to take your animals with you. If you leave, you have to take your animals with you. And unfortunately, every area that we go to that has flooding, there are always animals that are left behind in those areas.
What bothers me is that seems to be a basic thing that one must understand. If you have a companion animal, if you're responsible, it's a living thing. And I know that PETA in its messages it says, take your animals, don't leave them. But yet people still do. Why do you think people do that? Do they just not think? Or do you think that they don't care? Or they think that the animals will survive on their own? Well, what do you think goes through people's minds?
From talking to people that have gone through the flooding, I think that there are a couple of different things that happen. I think it's generally just not being prepared for something happening. One of the dogs that we rescued, the guy said, hey, I went out to get a bite to eat, and when I went to come back to my house, they wouldn't let me back in that area because of the flooding. And it's hard because I think that everyone really needs to have a disaster plan. I think that we, knew for a couple weeks leading up to this that Florence was coming and that it was going to hit the coast of North Carolina and that it was going to cause serious issues with flooding. So I think that generally people are not prepared enough and they need to have a disaster plan. And also I think sometimes people think, oh, it'll be okay. I will be able to go back in a couple of days and he'll be okay. A different person that we spoke to who we went in and got their animals out, he thought, oh, was he just in there swimming around? And it's like, well, no. I mean, he was up on the counter desperately trying to get out of the floodwaters. And I mean, I think that some people just don't think it's as serious as it is for them. But I mean, anytime an animal's left behind, if they live through that experience, they're lucky because a lot of them don't live through it.
Well, tell us what you found. Tell us the dog on the counter, were there animals floating? I mean, I've seen and heard people say, but what did you, as one of the leads, on this mission from PETA, what did you see? What was it like to see all the water and the animals there?
I'm not even sure the number of animals we ended up pulling out. It was a lot. We found cats in trees, dogs that were confined in a fenced-in backyard that wasn't able to even really touch the ground, just swimming around in that area, barely being able to stay above water. Yeah, when we got down there, we launched into one of the neighborhoods that experienced some significant flooding. Almost immediately when we got back in the neighborhood, we heard a cat crying out. So we ended up at that first house, we ended up finding two cats. One was up on the front porch. The bottom of the porch was underwater, but you could just see her sitting up there on the rails. And luckily these cats were crying out for us. Cats are really hard to find because they're, when cats are scared, they usually hunker down and hide. So it can be harder to find the cats, but we found one of the cats on the porch and then one of the cats were in the backyard. She was up in the tree. I mean, that was immediately when we got into the neighborhood. And at that point, the water was about chest high. As we went on, just a couple houses down, we heard another cat crying, and this was a kitten that had climbed up on a shed. And this is a kitten that, we searched to find other kittens because this kitten was about, 7 weeks old. It's just instantly as we got in the neighborhood, there were animals really everywhere. Not far down from there, we saw a dog that was swimming in a backyard. He was in a fenced-in area where he didn't have anywhere where he could really escape the water. As soon as we got him in the boat and settled in, I mean, he was just out, and he didn't get up until we got him to the emergency vet that night.
And how many of you are in this team? And are you just responding as you walk through to anything you see, or are you responding to specific calls? How does it work?
We usually touch base with animal control, the police department, the fire department, based on where they have seen animals at. And then we usually canvass that whole neighborhood, because if you've seen one animal back there, you really want to clear the whole area to make sure no one else is back there. And then you just run into people and they tell you more and more. I mean, we pulled a dog out of a house that a guy from the neighborhood was back. He had walked in. This was again about chest high water. He had walked in to check on his own house, and he said, "Hey, my neighbor had actually called me and told me that her dog was in there, so I put some food in there." And so he was able to call the neighbor who was happy to have us get the dog out of the house. But they had evacuated to several cities away and didn't even know when they were going to be back in this area.
Yeah. Now, how many animals did you personally handle and deal with and rescue? I mean, and how many other members of your team were there? So maybe we can come up with a number, just from based on the animals you saw, saved, and dealt with.
So we have 5 people on our team, and I really couldn't give you an exact number. I'm sure I could go through the days and come up with something, but we really don't keep track just because things are really, moving very fast. So it's not something like
Sure.
I specifically tally up the numbers. We do take all of the animals to animal control. They have a system set up so that people can reclaim their animals, or then if they are not reclaimed, they're available for adoption. So all of the animals that we got did go to animal control. So I'm sure they would have a number. I know that when I was speaking to them, they said that they had 200 animals were removed from the floodwaters. And that was just in the area we were working in Lumberton, North Carolina.
So you were in Lumberton with just 5 people. And when I say that number, just the number of people who are part of your team, it just seems like an almost impossible sort of task with the floodwaters and the rain. How do you stay positive given the enormous task that is in front of you? How do you just stay, focused on the job that you have to do?
Well, I mean, I personally try not to let many of my own emotions involved until after we're done with our task. I'm not really sure exactly how the rest of the people on our team stay positive, but I think that, one of the things that really helps keep us motivated is knowing that if we didn't find these animals or we didn't keep on looking for them, they very likely could die. And I mean, the situations that we found them in, I mean, they're really life or death situations for them. So, I mean, it's really motivating to keep going.
Are there any animals in particular that stick in your mind? Tell us about some of those individual animals.
One of the dogs that we found, he was a large black Rottweiler mix. We found him in a backyard in a fenced-in area where, he was really just able to toe touch to keep out of the water. And it's just, at that point, the floodwater had been up for 3 days. So how he stayed alive in that time of swimming and keeping above water for 3 days, it's just unbelievable. And when he did get into the boat, he was just so exhausted. And even, the next day, his legs were still hard for him to walk on because he had spent so long swimming around.
Oh, and what happened to him? Did he get adopted? Did he go to a shelter? What happened?
So because he was out there for so long, and because he was so exhausted, and we weren't sure exactly how serious his situation was, we did take him to an emergency vet overnight to get him stabilized. And then the next day we took him to the Robeson County Animal Control where they were holding the animals. I'm not really sure exactly if he was reclaimed or, if he will be available for adoption. But that's, we took him there after, the next day he was feeling better.
Yeah. Any other animals come to mind besides, did he have a name, this black Rottweiler?
Well, the vet tech at the emergency clinic was very fond of him, and she named him Sebastian.
Oh, Sebastian.
So we've been calling him that.
Any others come to mind?
Yeah, so there was a cat that we heard crying, and we kind of followed her cries, and we found her in the backyard, and she was up a tree, and one of the people on our team was able to get back there and get her down. And it's like, at this point, that area, I mean, the area has been canvassed and there's no one back there, but that area still has water now. And it's, a week and a half after the storm. So it's like this cat's option was, just to stay up that tree.
And what do they, when they see you, what kind of reaction do these animals have to you who have come to rescue them?
I think their reaction is a little mixed. They have just gone through a really terrifying ordeal. So I think that most of the animals are pretty nervous at first, but they usually really warm up pretty quickly and are happy to, have someone there helping them. Specifically with cats, the one of the cats that we picked up at first, we thought that she might not be social at all because when she saw us, she kind of took off and started swimming in the water, and we were able to get her out. But then once we got back and, the situation was a little bit calmer, she was extremely friendly and, really enjoyed being snuggled and handled. Whereas it's just the situation is just so intense for them in that moment.
And the cats and the dogs are all just, I imagine, just all soaking wet, right? I mean, because you don't really think of a cat as being a swimmer, but I guess they can swim.
Yes, cats, I was a little surprised myself. Cats are extremely good swimmers.
And so you got all these wet cats and you have kittens. Are they even good swimmers when they're kittens, or what kind of, tell me about some of the kitten situations you found yourself in.
Well, I actually haven't seen a kitten in the water. Typically, when we found any kittens, they're usually hiding a bit. We found a kitten on top of a wood pile. We found them on top of a trash can. I haven't actually seen them in the water myself. I mean, I'm sure that, that happens with them. Unfortunately, I think that, one of the kittens that we found, like I said, she was pretty young, so I'm not really sure where her litter mates are. I mean, I know in Harvey as well, we found, litters of kittens too. And it's just, you have to wonder, like, how many litters of kittens are you not finding, all of them?
Did you find any animals locked up in kennels or chained up with the water rising?
Yeah, when we were canvassing a neighborhood, we did find a dog who was chained in the backyard. We actually followed we were on the other side of the neighborhood and we heard him barking, and he drew us to him. Usually when we're canvassing the neighborhood, we're making calls out for them to try to make them respond to, our animal noises. And he was barking, letting us know where he was at. And we found him chained up in a backyard. He was about chest deep on a heavy chain. He didn't have a chance to get away from the flood water.
Tell me about the preparation that you had to go through to get to be in the position where you could save these animals. And how do you react every time you see an animal like this in distress? How is the preparation helpful when you try to approach an animal who's been stuck for so many days out there in the water?
So everyone on our team has a significant amount of animal handling experience. And I think that, in these situations, you really need very experienced handlers because, like I said, these animals are scared. They've gone through a really terrible storm, and then they don't know us. So I think that, we really try to approach every situation in the calmest way possible. We want to make sure that we respond quickly so that, because it is a dire situation, but we want to also make sure that it's as calm and gentle and as, it is the least amount of stress possible.
Did you find animals who didn't want to be rescued or who ran away? Or they're so frightened by what they've been through that they don't trust you?
Well, we definitely have came across some animals that were scared, and I wouldn't really say that they don't want to be rescued. I think that they have had a lot of really scary things coming at them, and sometimes, unfortunately, we can be part of that. And in that situation, I think the quickest and as gentle as possible handling is our approach. We had a cat that we found who was inside a home. We were able to make contact with the owner, and she said, "Yes, please go in and get my cat." The cat was really freaked out, and she ended up jumping out the window when we went into the bedroom. At that point, we were able to scoop her up with the carrier once she was in the water, and she was really scared, and that experience added to the stress. But in the end, she was gotten out of the house and made comfortable.
For every animal you saved, how many animals was it just too late and you got there not in time? They were either floating or something like that. And did you see a lot of that?
We definitely saw some animals that had already passed away. Our very first stop down there, we got to an address that was flooded, and several of the chickens on the property had already passed. And then there were some dogs on the property that the water was reaching the top of their dog houses. They were outside in a pen. So that was our very first stop when we found the chickens. There were places where some of the dogs had already passed away. I mean, I really think that in situations where animals are confined and not able to do anything for themselves, even to get out of the floodwater. It's not just that they were left behind, but then they were also confined so that they can't even do anything for themselves. We come across that situation, unfortunately, fairly often.
And I guess the answer would be, if you're going to abandon your companion animal, or if you're going to find yourself in a circumstance where you can't go back in because the police have restricted access to your property, at least in the future, let them or leave them in a situation where they are free. I mean, not locked up, for example. If that had happened, I guess it sounds like it would be more chaos, but it probably would be safer for the animals, huh?
Well, I would never want anybody to leave their animal behind because I know what the end result is. But if there is absolutely no other option, then if they're being left, the best case for them is to be loose so that they can do something for themselves to escape the water or the wind or the whatever the object is that's causing the situation to be so intense.
Now, considering this is an area that sees a lot of rain and, hurricane season is not foreign if you live in the Carolinas or in Virginia or on that, that Florida, that southeastern corridor. Are you surprised that people weren't as prepared as they should have been? Because it sounds like maybe a good many were kind of in the dark in terms of what to do with their animals.
I was pretty surprised that so many animals were left behind because this was an area where just 2 years before they were hit by Hurricane Matthew and had a significant amount of flooding then. So I was surprised that, people didn't have more of a plan. They kind of knew what was going to happen based on what happened 2 years ago.
Going forward, I mean, should there be more efforts to make sure that people are more aware, or once again, we saw this 2 years ago and, it didn't make people necessarily any more prepared this time. But do you think there should be a more concerted effort to make sure that people are aware?
Oh, absolutely. That's why one of the people on our film or on our team is filming what we do so that people know when you leave your animals behind, this is what's happening. So, I mean, education is absolutely, we absolutely have to educate people on what happens during these storms.
I think we need to thank your crew that's not only saving animals, but doing the documentary work and filming. Let me ask you, just what is your day job at PETA? Because there's not disasters every day. It's a seasonal thing. But when you work at PETA, what do you usually do?
On my day-to-day at PETA, I'm the field operations manager in the Community Animal Project. We work in Hampton Roads area of Virginia and southeastern North Carolina. We help with educating people on how to better care for their companion animals. We have a low-cost spay-neuter program and a doghouse program, just to improve the lives of the animals in those areas.
Given that it's also part of a shelter, were you able to save some animals, bring some back to Norfolk, and then maybe offer them up for adoption there?
Yeah, so we're in contact with the animal control facility where we took the animals to about once their hold being over, possibly getting some of those animals to place up for adoption.
So if people want to adopt some of the survivors of Florence that PETA rescued, they can just go to PETA.org and inquire about the potential of adopting one of these animals?
Yeah, so typically the hold period is at least 30 days to give people time to adjust back to life. So after that period, we'll get back in touch with the facility, and then we would be able to have information on adoption for those animals.
Now, did that happen also after Maria and after Harvey? Were you able to bring back some animals to Norfolk and adopt them out to families?
Yeah, we did. We after Hurricane Harvey, we brought animals back to our shelter here in Norfolk, and we worked with several shelters in the area to get some of the animals adopted, as well as we flew animals back after Hurricane Maria from Puerto Rico as well.
And I imagine that when you get to see an animal you save get adopted, there must be a kind of satisfaction that you're able to not just preserve a life, but you're able to extend it by getting a home for this animal. Huh?
Absolutely. I adopted one of the dogs that we brought back from Puerto Rico, and, he's such a wonderful guy. And when I, look at him, sometimes I think about all he's gone through. And I'm just, so thankful that, he's in a place where he's happy and healthy and that he made it through that situation. And the same for all of the other animals that we brought back. It is extremely rewarding to know that they are safe.
And I guess that's sort of the good part of doing the kind of work you do for this aspect of the job, going into disasters. But we're not done with hurricane season yet. There still could be more. Huh?
That's true. There could be more this season. We just got back, but we track the storms as they're coming. We keep our supplies kind of ready. And I guess, I'm hoping for a calm rest of the season. But, if something comes up, we will head back out.
Now, it's got to be kind of a little, you got to be on edge around this time of year because you got to be ready on a kind of personal level to take action, right? And it means long hours and exhausting work. How do you prepare for all this and also the emotional experience of trying to save animals?
It is definitely a more intense season for me. I'm very thankful to have a very supportive family that, helps take care of my life while I'm gone. And I think that emotionally, it's a very intense situation.
What are the kinds of things that could help your efforts during these kind of emergencies?
Yeah, so our crew is usually 5 people. It depends on how long the situation lasts. We do sometimes switch out people. Sometimes we add more people to that. Before Hurricane Harvey, we realized that we would need a boat for this operation. So someone was able to donate a boat for us to take with us. Generally, we prepare our supplies. Specifically the water is pretty unsanitary. So, we do have special pants that we wear in there. And then there's general animal supplies that we always take with us for the trip. And we have those ready to go before the storm.
I know what it's like when it's rainy and it's cold and you hear all the talk about the amount of pig manure that's released into the water, and it's just a ucky situation. How do you gear up to deal with all that? Because I know some people would just fold and say, "Oh no, I'm not going into that mess." How do you gird up to do the thing that has to be done? I mean, is it all about the animals? Is it courage? How do you do it?
Our team is really motivated by getting the animals out and knowing that if we don't, they are going to suffer. I think that we have been trained and we are as careful as absolutely possible while we're there for ourselves. So I think that knowing and trusting each other, as well as being motivated by knowing that these animals are in there and that they're suffering and they're waiting for someone to find them. That's what motivates us. You can wash off the water, we take care of ourselves. And sure, I'm not super stoked about being in gross water or, possibly having anything dangerous in the water, but I trust my team and I trust what motivates us. And that's why we're there.
And after it's all done, and it's not really all done because there's still some high waters, do you feel like how do you assess how you did? And do you ever think about the ones that you couldn't get to?
Yes. I wonder if there are ones we have that we didn't know about. It's hard to know where the animals are at. I wish there was a sign on every door saying, "Hey, there's a cat in here." Unless there's some indication that makes us know that there's a, cat in a house or a dog in a house, we really don't know. So yes, I definitely wonder about that, but we do everything we can to make sure that we don't miss anybody. And, if I thought there was more that we could do, we would stay down there. To the best of my knowledge, we didn't miss anybody. I know that's probably not true, and it's something that weighs on my mind. I think that success-wise, those animals that we did get out were given a second chance, and that makes the trip successful, those animals that we got.
Well, Jes, I know that all people have to do is go to PETA.org. They see the pictures. They see all the work that your team did on Twitter and at PETA.org. And I just want to congratulate you and all your team for your efforts. I know a lot of people, when they started hearing about the rain and then the 100-year flooding, they started thinking about the animals. And it's almost like a standard kind of thing in the process. First responders, and then the next one, the next questions is, well, what about people's animals? And it's not just the companion animals in people's homes, but also all the farm animals. Did you ever deal with farm animals down there, or were you just in Lumberton in the urban area?
We didn't run it. We found some chickens, but as for large farm animals, we didn't really run into any. We were more inside the city of Lumberton. I did hear there were many farm animal issues, but we didn't specifically come into that situation.
I know that you're pretty much in that urban area of Lumberton, and I know that everyone who goes to PETA.org and sees the pictures can be, just be thankful that the effort was made to save as many, many companion animals that, as possible. So once again, Jes Cochran, thank you very much, and congratulations to you and your team.
Thank you.
Jes Cochran, part of the 5-member team deployed to North Carolina to save as many animals as they could from the wrath of Florence. You can see what they did and take action. See Cochran and her team save animals that they encountered. Go see those pictures at PETA.org. You can contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok. That's EMILAMOK, or on amok.com, AMOK.com. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on Apple Podcasts, where you can rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. And don't forget, you can help the animals and PETA, especially if you have Amazon's Alexa. Just say, Alexa, donate to PETA. Our music is provided by Carbonworks. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. Thank you for listening. I'm Emil Guillermo.